Welcome to Dr. Akmal's YouTube channel. He is a psychiatrist, social commentator, and author. Today, we're going to be looking at another episode of Forgotten Philosophies and discussing Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So, this is the introduction, part one. What would you like to say about him?
When we were doing our previous philosophers like Heidegger, Hegel, and others, a friend of mine, a very valued and respected friend of mine, suggested that we should talk about Rousseau as well. And Rousseau is one of those philosophers that I read when I was younger and instilled with revolutionary ideas. So Voltaire and Rousseau were two which really were the most exciting philosophers at that time. But now, when you revisit Rousseau, one with age and with experience reflects on it in a different manner. But let's first talk of his introduction rather than the critique, and let's talk of his contributions. Rousseau was a person who was a French speaking Swiss who was born in Geneva. And Geneva was actually a city state. So we need to actually get our heads around the concept of the city state rather than large countries and large empires. So at that time in 1712, when he was born, and he died at around at age 66, I think, yes. And so he died at 1778. So he was living in a very Christian state, a Protestant Calvinist state, which was a small, austere society. People were all similar, and he really loved that Republican lifestyle. But then he left Geneva when he felt that Geneva wasn't for him, and he was scared that he came home very late and was fearful of the consequences, so he decided that he should leave. And so he went away and on his travels, and between France and Geneva or Switzerland, he found himself supported by an older young lady who was kind of a sponsor for him,
An
whom he
older or
called.
young?
Well, she was older, young. She was 28.
Okay.
He was 16.
Oh, right. I see.
So she was very young, but she
Mm.
was older than him.
Yeah.
And so he called her maman, mother, little mother. And although their relationship changed as he grew up and became more romantic, but he was most impressed and most influenced by that lady who sponsored him, looked after him, helped him educate himself, found jobs for him, and so on. So Rousseau's contribution, if we try to capture them, so this lady was Madame de Varenne, and she was his benefactor, and he was her beneficiary for most of his life. But before talking about that, and we will discuss his personal life a little, but I think we should first start with the contributions. So there are about 5 general contributions that we must acknowledge that brought about major change in thinking of the world. And he is also credited with being the political father, the spiritual father of the French Revolution. Now, French Revolution is also called a godless revolution, but that's not entirely true because Rousseau was a Christian through and through. Although, like Machiavelli, he did not believe that organized church had anything to do with religion, but he believed in Christianity in its pure form, the man and God relationship. So, one thing that Rousseau contributed was the romantic view of the world. The romantic view of the world was that uh, there is the rational brain and there is the basic brain, the love for self, love for others, and he believes that more primitive lifestyle, where the primitive man, he filled his tummy and he looked after other people, he looked after his tribe, he was generous, he was caring, and he was martial. And what he believed, that the new man, the civilized man, is an empty man, is a man who is not led by love of self and others, but of comparison, comparators. What brand of clothes am I wearing compared to the other one? What brand of cars that I'm driving compared to the other one? What kind of house do I have compared to my neighbor? Now, although cars and brands of clothes may not be the issue of that time, but of course, money, stature, status, wealth, um, land ownership, connections with the powerful, and these were the things that were relevant at that time for people. And so he actually is the kind of romantic who brings about to the philosophical discussion of that time, that try to be more romantic in life, try to be more pure. And romantic doesn't mean romantic in the, the current contemporary romantic sense, romance between a man and a woman, but romance in terms of romance with nature, romance with values, romance with your passions of humanity and your passions of interacting with other people. This may also be something to do with the austere lifestyle that he liked in Geneva, because they were not ostentatious as we see compared to Paris and other capitals of the world at that time. So one was the Romantic movement. The other movement that he brought about and became extremely influential, and that influence is still there, is the book that he wrote called Emile, in which he talks of a child and the bringing up of a child and the education of a child. Now, what he suggests is that children are born pure, they are good, unlike the Christian or the ecclesiastical and the church's point of view, that man is born in sin, that there is the eternal sin of man, whereas he goes totally counter to that. And he talks about the purity of the child and the soul, and then he believes that the child should be protected from all the um, pseudo artificial attractions of the world. Child should be educated through problem solving, through a growth which is close to nature. And so the idea of breastfeeding, he believed that breastfeeding was one of the most important things in a child's life. And he believed that all virtue comes from breastfeeding. If that was done, because many people didn't do it, and many people had, nurses to feed their children or their infants. So what we see today is the importance of breastfeeding. Rousseau was the person who talked about it. And then also problem-based learning, which you see now. It's not theoretical learning, which used to be the historical learning until recently. And in the last 2 decades, you see that problem solving and problem-based learning has come out. And that's Rousseau's work. And that is his emphasis. Now, what he also believed, the third most important aspect is, and from that we will talk of the other two, is the construction and the format of society. And his book, The Social Contract, actually addresses that. And within the social contract, he talks of the mandate for government. Where should the mandate come from? And then also the structure of the government and the will of the people, the general will. And so these were the topics in the social contract that attracted people, because that was the time when there was absolute monarchy. France, which is now currently claiming to be the in the forefront of democracy and liberty and fraternity and equality, was a most oppressive monarchy. So were monarchs everywhere in Prussia and other parts of the world. So what he brought about was that uh, this was not a natural state of things. He believed that anything an individual is forced and compelled to do is unethical, immoral, and irreligious. So that is the reason why he is credited with being the father of the French Revolution and being the father of, because he was asked to actually contribute to the Constitution of Poland.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
No, please go on.
So, what I would say is that his contribution is immense. But when we will talk about the details of the social contract, when we will talk about the details of what he means by mandate, what he means by the general will, and how he perceives government or republic, what he thought of religion, then we will talk about it more critically. But the important thing that I see is that a person with great personal weaknesses and sort of charms, but a person who brought about a huge change that goes on hundreds of years beyond his death, and he has influenced millions and millions of people, and some of his thoughts are still very relevant, and although some of his thoughts have been criticized severely, and we can talk about that in the next time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed the video, click like and share.